5. It's July 2025. We're in the second half of the year now. So let's look at the stock performance of major game companies from Japan, Korea, China, the United States, and Europe over the first 6 months of 2025. A lot of those actually did incredibly well. Japan in particular has been completely insane, and the winners, I think, are going to surprise you. But first, quick self-introduction. Hi everybody, my name is Dr. Todo. I'm a game industry consultant, primarily based in Singapore and Tokyo, with around 15 years of professional experience in the business. And what you can see here is the website of my consultancy, Kantan Games. You can follow me online under the links that I put in the video description. And very important, as always, this video is purely educational and not financial advice in any way. I cannot cover all the publicly traded game companies that we have in the world, so I needed to make a selection and landed at a few studios that are of somewhat significant size and relevance in the context of this video, that focus on video games, that focus on a AAA game, at least to some extent, and other factors like that. So the list is, of course, subjective. And looking at Japan first, I selected the 8 big traditional video game companies that we have in this country, plus Nexon, which is a Korean company by background, but which is actually headquartered and listed, publicly traded in Tokyo. And in this list, Sega is at the bottom, so to speak, this time around, with the just quote-unquote 12.13% in the first 6 months of this year, of the year to date, January 6th until June 30 in the case of the Japanese companies. And with Sega, it's always a little bit of a difficult topic, because it's not Sega that we're talking about, it's Sega Sammy Holdings, which includes a sizable gambling business that also, of course, plays a big role when it comes to financial numbers for the entire holding. And then you have Sony with just plus 12.99% in the first 6 months of this year. And I think the biggest headache for investors in the case of this company is the low margins that Sony is looking at in their PlayStation business. Koei Tecmo, there's already a big jump here to plus 28.88%. So very nice performance for this company so far in 2025. Here, I think the investors are appreciating, the restructuring that is going on inside the Koei Tecmo. That there was a personnel reshuffle on the executive level. They have a couple of hits, potential hits in the pipeline in terms of software. They have a partnership with Microsoft, and all of these things contributed. And I cannot speak about every single detail that flows into this in the context of this video to these stock performances of this company and all the companies that follow, but I can just briefly mention a couple of bullet points. Nexon is in the same ballpark with plus 30.61%. In the case of Nexon, the biggest driver for the stock price, at least in recent weeks, has been the alleged interest of Tencent in potentially, possibly, maybe acquiring Nexon at some point in time. So that is a publicly shared rumor made by a publication, but neither Nexon or Tencent have confirmed that actual discussions, at least at some deeper level, are ongoing. So it's just a rumor. Bandai Namco has been doing very well so far this year, plus 39.22%, and the stock is almost at an all-time high. And here I think the investors are appreciating also, just like with a little bit like Koei Tecmo, that the company has presented a plan where they want to restructure the company to, at least to some extent, for example, focus more on IP creation, expansion. There's a Hollywood movie coming, for example, based on Bandai Namco's Gundam science fiction franchise, together with Legendary Pictures. They closed some projects, they fired some people. Things like that usually help the stock price. And in the case of Bandai Namco, you see their stock has seen a big jump, especially after February 2025. Capcom has been killing it for the last couple of years now, and this year alone, the stock has gone up 46.33%. It saw an all-time high last week. I'm recording this at the start of July 2025, and the company is having basically like it's a golden era at the moment, right? And they have Resident Evil in the pipeline for next year, Pragmata, and a few other big games that are coming out most probably next year if nothing comes in between. Then Nintendo, the big N, with plus 47.50%. This stock also hit an all-time high last week. So Nintendo has also been killing it for the last couple of years now. First, because of the smash success that this company saw with the Switch 1, and now this year in particular with the performance of the Switch 2 so far. Konami is another interesting case, plus 57.50%. Also, the stock hit an all-time high last week. And this may come as a surprise to a lot of people watching this video, but this company, and again, I'm just listing very few bullet points that play a factor here, but one big one is that they still have a very, very strong mobile gaming business in Japan, where they've been operating a number of very successful sports apps that basically have almost or very limited competition in their home market. And the second big bullet point in the case of Konami at the moment, at least, is that they are taking a page of Capcom's book and trying to revitalize their hit IP from yesteryear, so to speak. So a Silent Hills game remake came out earlier this year. Another one is coming soon, or in the next couple of years at least. There's a Metal Gear Solid remake coming in August, and all of these bullet points helped Konami with their stock this year. But the big winner in Japan in terms of video game stock performance is Square Enix, plus 74.53%. And the stock also hit an all-time high last week. So Square Enix stock has also been absolutely killing it, especially in the last week. So you can see on the graph here the big jump that started in late April. And I think that I'm not insulting our friends at the Square Enix if I say that the main driver, however, was that an activist investor, another activist investor, they already had a couple, but or at least one big one, called 3D Investment Partners from Singapore, has shown very strong interest in this company. And I made a separate video about that. And that activist investor has been driving up the stock, also because the investor is now controlling, I think it's around 11% as of the recording of this video. So Square Enix is the big winner in terms of stock performance among all video game companies, the big ones that are publicly traded in Japan so far in 2025. So next, let's look at our friends from Korea and China, where I chose two companies each. And again, I could make the list a lot longer. So I made a selection based on the criteria that I mentioned alone. It's very subjective, I know that. And in the case of Korea, let's look at Shift Up first, minus 20.10% for the company behind Stellar Blade. This year so far, and you see a discrepancy between the number that I show for Shift Up right here, minus 20.10%, and what Google Finance is showing you on this graphic right here, because I'm shooting this video a few days after June 30, which is the cutoff for the first 6 months of 2025. And in the case of Shift Up, I'm actually a little bit surprised, because Stellar Blade 1, which just released on PC, is doing very well on that platform. Apparently there's a Stellar Blade 2 coming, but not too many investors are believing in this stock, at least at the moment. Krafton has been doing better with a plus 14.6.9% so far this calendar year. This is the company behind PUBG. In Japan, they're famous for having acquired Tango from Microsoft a couple of months ago. So I would say overall it's pretty solid performance by this particular company so far. And then on the China side, we have our friends from Tencent, plus 20.91%. In the case of this company, the biggest video game company or game company in general in the world in terms of revenue. And Tencent has just been doing Tencent things in 2025. Nothing that really particularly sticks out, I would say, apart from their engagement or increased engagement with Ubisoft that they announced earlier this year. But Tencent is doing pretty well again this year. But they've been outshined this year so far by NetEase, their rival in the Chinese gaming market. So NetEase is a distant second to Tencent, so make no mistake about that. But this year, their stock has gone up plus 53.57%. And the stock reached an all-time high earlier this week. These guys have been basically killing it with Marvel Rivals, which I know launched in late 2024, but of course, the game carries over to 2025, and that helped the stock perform, as you can see here on this graph. There's other factors in the case of NetEase also. I'm just highlighting this one, I think that NetEase investors that were holding at least the stock this year can be very happy with the performance so far. So finally, let's look at the West, at Europe and America in particular. And I chose a couple of companies from these two regions of the world, again, very subjectively. And on the bottom of this list, unfortunately, is Ubisoft, minus 26.98% so far in the first 6 months of this year, at least. So as everybody, or most of the people watching this video will know, Ubisoft has been going through a very rough patch over the last few years already. As I mentioned earlier, Tencent has increased their engagement with Ubisoft, their financial engagement with Ubisoft earlier this year, and they launched Assassin's Creed Shadows in March 2025, quite successfully, I would say. And you do see quite a bump in the stock price around that release, but overall this year the stock has not really been doing very well. Unity, the company that is mostly known for its game engine, has been kind of like going sideways in the first 6 months of 2025. And here I would say one big bullet point is the launch of an advertising project or like a new product that they have called Vector. That excited the investor base to some extent for a certain period of time. But as you can see here, the stock has not really seen a dramatic rise, but at least also not a dramatic drop over the last 6 months. And actually, in the case of Unity, the advertising business is much, much bigger than the game engine business that they are known for by the public and by media, for instance. Electronic Arts, that stock has gone up plus 9.17% over the last 6 months. Not too bad, I would say. If you look at the company, I mean, do they have a lot of killer games coming? Not too many, I would say. Battlefield might see a turnaround when that new entry is coming soon. They closed a couple of projects, and it's been, I would say, it's been doing, the stock has been doing okay so far this year. Microsoft, with their together with the Xbox business, of course, a gigantic conglomerate. So it's a little bit difficult, even more difficult, I would say, than looking at Sony with all of the businesses that they have, apart from the PlayStation business. But the stock had hit an all-time high this week. So as you can see on the graph, it's almost at $500, plus 18.83% at the cutoff on June 30 over the last when compared to over the last 6 months prior. And this week in particular, as of the recording of this video at the start of July 2025, has been quite crazy for Microsoft. So they cut a whole lot of games and studios and people, etc., etc. But again, the stock has been performing very well, especially as you can see on the graph here since spring 2025. Take-Two plus 32.65%. Their stock hit an all-time high last week. And of course, here the big factor is GTA 6. even though Take-Two earlier this year in May, they said that GTA 6 is actually going to be coming out only in May 2026. So there's been a significant delay, but that didn't stop the stock from rising over the last 6 months. And hey, GTA 6, if you have that piece of software in your portfolio, you probably don't need a lot more to help the stock price appreciate like this. Another big winner is CD Projekt Red this year so far, plus 45.12%. And here I think the big bullet points are The Witcher 4, which is now in full production. It has been actually in full production, I believe, since late last year. Here, they showed a nice demo of Witcher 4, which was kind of like more of a graphics demo, I think, than anything else. These kind of things, sometimes, they do excite investors. And they also said that the sequel to Cyberpunk 2077 entered pre-production a couple of weeks ago, and that helped the stock go up, particularly in the last couple of weeks, as you can see on the graph, in the case of CD Projekt Red. But the biggest winner, and the biggest winner of them all in this video, is Roblox, plus 78.89%. And I know they're not making AAA games or anything like that. It's more of a game platform than an actual game company. But I included this company because they've been just killing it in terms of stock performance. They're still actually far away from the all-time high that they saw in around the corona pandemic, but the stock has gone up incredibly over the last couple of years, starting in spring actually. Until then, it was kind of like going sideways. And one reason recently is that they are now having a game in their portfolio called Grow a Garden, which recently saw over 21 million concurrent users, an absolutely crazy number.
Let's finish with a quick recap. So what you can see here on the screen is an overview of all the companies that I mentioned in this video. And on the top of the screen, you can see the 9 video game companies from Japan, with Square Enix being the big winner in that list, with that ridiculous almost 75% plus that they saw. And the first 5 companies in that list saw their stock going to all-time highs over the last couple of days. So again, Japan has been absolutely crazy in recent weeks in terms of video game companies and their stock prices. And then further down the list, you see Krafton and Shift Up. Nothing too exciting, I would say. And between NetEase and Tencent, of course, NetEase this time is the big winner, at least for the first 6 months of this year. And their stock also hit an all-time high. And on the bottom of the screen, you see the Western game companies that I mentioned, with Roblox being the big overall winner in the context of this entire list. And I would say that the company that is sticking out negatively here in this entire overview is Ubisoft, with their unfortunate performance so far this year. And now the question for these guys is, of course, will they be able to turn the ship around and maybe climb up the list next time I make a video like this, hopefully at the end of this year. But that's it for this video. Thank you very much for watching, and catch you next time.